Good evening. This is Ronald Allen with Managing Change through Effective Communications. And certainly today's communications is that I'm coming on a little later than I wanted to, but the weather was so incredible today. It must have been like 60, 65 degrees. We got carried away outside. I just wanted to feel the cool warmth of the day's breeze compared to last week's bone-chilling Arctic blasts that we experienced. Anna, how are you? Thanks for checking in with me. Today's discussion, behavioral assessments, but with a twist. We're going to talk about comedy. Yes, why comedy? Well, a dear, shall I say, colleague in the world of effective communications, Patricia Fripp. Those of you who know her, Fripp, F-R-I-P-P, you can certainly Google her. First female president of the National Speakers Association. She's all of but 4'9", maybe 4'10" now. And she is a blast of personality, of perfection in her craft. And she is light-hearted, yet a very serious composure when she's working with her clients and customers alike. And this is kind of where I got this idea to talk about how we assess ourselves through these behavioral analysis tools and some of the Myers-Briggs, Caliper, etc., DISC, personality style assessment tools, and yet comedy, how it can play to ease up on how serious we are, how frustrating a situation might be, and certainly how annoying we allow, right, there's the gateway, we allow people to get on our nerves. Janet, good evening. Thank you very much for checking in. So today's discussion is going to be a little different, okay, but it's going to be very serious. Because if you notice, and I have up on my laptop here, 100 of all-time comedians and what they are good at, what they identify with. And we can subscribe to that because, as most of us always express, life is not easy, life is not fair, things are a challenge, people that you thought would help you don't, people that you thought loved you don't. Things that just don't turn out the way we want them to, yet it is the ability to look inside, look at the comedy, the juxtaposition between what you anticipated, the reality, and what you experienced. And there's three areas. I think there are three, probably even more, that in any one situation we can relate to. So I'm going to kind of dig straight in, and this is my what is this one? Disc. This is a disc. And I do these every kind of quarter. I like them because in some cases I trick the system, or at least I try. Others I like to be very straightforward and earnest, and then assess what they produce for me. And then I look at another stage is, well, what can I do with that information? Not does it define me, which many people look at these behavioral profile studies as, and in the way that they look at them. Rather, what can I do with that information? And I'll give you a very simple example. My wife and I always use good guy, bad guy when we're going to shop, right? Why? Because we're trying to get the best agreement that we need. Not just price, but agreement. We've learned long ago, sometimes getting a delivery, getting it set up, having a longer term contract, having no contract. You know, you buy an appliance today and they want to load you up with a 3-year warranty, which, by the way, one of those years is the first year that the product already has a warranty. Wait a minute, what's wrong with that picture? Is no one studying? Is no one listening to what's going on? So you can laugh at that. You can laugh at the absurdity of a salesperson trying to get over on you, and then you can play it back on them. So I'm just going to kind of walk through a few people that I enjoy their comedy. And I think primarily at different stages in my life, one was just the abruptness of people, right? Of the comedian. At one time, I think it was the late 70s and 80s, comedians started just using swear words. And we just laughed at the swear word. Try using that type of humor with your family and friends. They may not find it as comical. Yet in a public environment, when we used to go to the comedy clubs in New York, that's what they did. Today, many comedians talk about the state of social injustice or the state of social unrest. And we find that juxtaposition, right? There's a gentleman new to the profession, Aziz Ansari. And here's an individual who initially, whose culture and nationality you would not have heard on the traditional circuit. Yet it is precisely that comedy that is refreshing, that's different, right, than the standard Bill and Bob, Mary, Joe, and Jane type comedy. When you think of the frustration of someone who's trying to get through life's experiences, and you then see a very different, or in fact, in some cases, a very similar frustration from someone who you might think, well, their life is far easier. So here's a few people that I really love and I've watched recently. Wanda Sykes, I mean, she is a laugh. She's a ball. She's incredibly intuitive to the cultural nuances. Why? One, she's lesbian. Two, she's married to a white French woman, right? They have white children. I mean, the comedy right there is incredible. Are you allowing yourself to think in this fashion? Are you considering that this doesn't occur, that it's against your social mores? This is where it gets a little interesting, doesn't it? Lucille Ball, probably one of my all-time favorites. A woman ahead of her curve at a time where, again, women were not considered to be entrepreneurs, and she certainly was, and also married to what we consider today a Latin American, right? What does that say about us as people with our acceptance and rejection of other people? And the comedy between this kind of very loud Brooklyn type voice, I know I'm killing it there, and yet this sophisticated Spanish gentleman who always wanted to be supportive of her and encouraging her, irrelevant of the private lives that they lived, right? We're not here to evaluate and assess. What is really interesting is that she brought families together in an environment that today very few comedy shows do it in an intelligent manner, in a socially responsible manner. It's either curt, it's offhanded, it's these are the young, these are the old people, these are the grandparents type mentality. Lenny Bruce, I didn't see a lot of his work. Jimmy, thanks for checking in with us. Lenny Bruce is an icon. He really is. If you watch some of his comedy on YouTube, you'll see why. Very, again, socially astute, subtleties, nuances, inflection, the topics that he speaks about. And yes, they are specific to his world. That is true of all of us. When we do communicate with one another, it is from our world. At the same time, what I've seen in a lot of these comedians is that they transcend their world by engaging other people that would otherwise think, he wouldn't have or she wouldn't have that experience. They wouldn't recognize these needs or subtleties, the injustices, the preferences, the love and affection, the pain. Now, pain is something that comedians know all too well. When we talk about personality profiles, and I know a lot of you are probably saying, where is he going with this stuff? How can you be talking about personality profiles in comedy? Well, if you've done your own personality profile and you found areas, which I certainly do, inspiring, enthusiastic, persuasive, predictive, perfectionist, lacking tolerance. I told you it's a comedian, right? Craig, good evening. How are you? These are two extremes. And if you look at the history of comedians, they are multiple personalities because of the way they were brought up. Richard Pryor is a prime example. Paul Moody is a prime example. what we're learning, what I have learned from this, is that the pain we have in life can be turned into an asset. So too, the assets that we think we have can be stripped from us all of a sudden. And as with Robin Williams and the illness that he felt, and that's all that's important, he felt he couldn't address, then how do we choose to deal with that? There are many others, comedians, who have done very well. Red Fox, for example, okay? Joan Rivers, again, another incredible woman who came through a profession. Understand something, the entertainment business is as unwielding, unforgiving, and debasing of character than any other profession. Why? Because it's you. It's not what you necessarily do, but it's you, your very core, it's very your essence. So for those of you who look at your personality profiles, and I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth here because I find this interesting. Some of our weaknesses, I honestly believe, can be our strengths. Well, why? How? Okay, if I have very little tolerance for people, is it that I'm not on their wavelength? Is it that I'm not getting what I need from that relationship? Is it not, Susan, good evening, thanks for checking in. Is it not Curtis, thank you very much, Curtis Cummings, I know that guy, hey, Happy New Year, sir. Is it that when we talk about our so-called weaknesses, our lack of tolerance of people who are not giving us what we want when we come to the table, I say the table of life, right? We're asking for something, we're presenting ourselves, and they're not responding. Should we continue down that road? Should we give up our personality, right? You know, Greek mythology always talks about that. English drama always is written around how people give up of themselves to be accepted in a group that won't have them anyway. What is it? The Three Stooges? I don't want to be part of an old association that would have me anyway. Liza Minnelli said, marriage is a great institution. I'm just not ready for the institution. I say religion is wonderful. They ain't ready for me. And I've shown that in some of my own discussions by identifying my areas of concern. Now, some of you might say, well, Ron, you know, that means we just all run off in our own separate directions. Not at all. Not at all. What we actually find is that we will be more sensitive, more polite, more on purpose when we engage with one another. We're going to take some time to pause. We're going to take some time to confirm what the other person is saying. We're going to let them know that, guess what? Some of the issues that Don Rickles talked about, I think he was brilliant. Another great guy, George Carlin. George Carlin was politically PC, non-PC before it was even termed. Go back and listen to some of his work on YouTube. That's the wonderful thing about YouTube. Doesn't matter when we had media, even black and white or even no sound, you can find it on YouTube. Abbott and Costello, okay? It was the ridiculousness of the situation. It was the hopelessness of the behavior. Don't you find that in some of the things you do? Do you think that you should give up? I say no. I say learn from those experiences. If people are not being responsive, if people are giving you a tough time, what it's telling you is make light of it and move around, move through, move over, go another direction. Unfortunately, so many of us think that we're stuck in these personality profiles, right? We think that, oh, well, this is who I am. This is where I am. I can't do any better. I don't have any way out. You know, we talk about pain and suffering, right? Sometimes it's a matter of time. In other words, you have to let it ferment, right? Like yeast with bread, like slow drying paint on a wall. During that time, you'll find that these comedians were improving on their skill sets. What do I mean by that? If you find yourself stuck in a situation, of course it depends. on how severe it is. If you do find yourself being managed by someone who's not terribly polite, if you're in a situation where the relationship is starting to go south, you should start to put on the brakes by assessing what options are open to you. And if you feel you don't have any, what if you then reached out to different organizations, not for answers, that's the dangerous part, for alternatives. There's a difference. Answers are absolute. I've got an answer, I can move with it. An alternative is, let me test it. Let me assess whether this is right for me. You know the old puppy dog clothes, right? You take the dog home for the weekend. By Monday, Tuesday, nobody wants to bring the dog back. They're embarrassed. They've paid a little fee. They've become somewhat attached to it. They've cleaned up some poop, so there's an attachment right there, right? Tony, thanks for checking in. What if we did that with our emotions? What if we started to look at how what we think we're experiencing, is that really helpful? Many comedians will tell you their road to what they thought they wanted was very difficult, and then they started to build character. We call it crocodile skin and buffalo hide, right? When life is shooting arrows, darts, and bazookas at you. Susan, thank you very much. How you doing? What can we do to fortify ourselves using humor, using laughter? It also is a chemical release. You know, when you start to laugh, has any of you had such a good laugh recently that you started to cry? Yikin, thank you very much. Tony, thanks for checking in. I appreciate it. Have you ever had that experience? What was going on? Did you take notice of what was going on? Was it just, as they say in the West Indies, a bacchanal? Was it a free-for-all? Was it more a controlled environment? Was it a conference where something happened, right? And you found it humorous. Can you find humor on yourself? Look at his one who I didn't write down, who I love, Ellen DeGeneres, and I'll tell you why. Ellen DeGeneres. And I'll tell you what, I'll give you a couple of minutes, maybe 30 seconds. Tell me why Ellen DeGeneres is different than any other comedian that I've mentioned or that you may know of. What is unique about her? And I'm going to talk about other stuff, but I want to come back to her because she is very unique. So the objective and the discussion tonight is really about your behavioral characteristics when we look at personality profiles. Yet it is the ability, which is innate in all of us, it's within all of us, to laugh at our own selves, to be cathartic about, are we really as serious? Are we as desperate? Are we as such frustrating characters as we sometimes put forth? Or can we just back off and realize that, number one, we're only here for a very short period of time. And as Samuel Jackson said in Hitman's Bodyguard, nobody gets out alive, right? We know this. So what about just letting go? You know, in the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about that. Don't get shored up by praise. Don't get cast down by blame. Come and go. I am in you. It was funny when I first came to the States and people asked me, you know, what religion I was. I said, I'm Roman Catholic. They said, well, there's still hope. You're in this church. Because I would fellowship at different churches. That's what I've always done. My parents had me baptized. No choice. But what was interesting was the experience of life showed me that people have different propensities, capabilities. They absorb from other cultures. They absorb from other situations. They are the willow tree, if you will, at times, and they can become the oak, right? In the ocean, we call that the gefilte fish, right? No bones. It's just like a octopus, right? That's how we have to sometimes be. And when we see something silly, let's laugh at it. When we see someone being hostile, let's laugh at them and show them, as my brother-in-law once said to me, I'm smiling, but I'm showing you my teeth. interesting. I didn't punch him out, but I don't wanted to at the time, but that was okay. These are the types of things that can diffuse a situation. If we walk into, we always use that word intent, with the right intent, we can look for multiple solutions and options. If we're at work and someone's being hostile, you can ask them, are they above you? Are they title above you? Are they in an authority position that you don't need to say, should not say anything? Well, these are some of the assessments we have to make on a daily basis. As I mentioned the other day with the previous live chat, when 9/11 struck, it wasn't more than a couple of weeks before, yes, we were having comical relief. That's what it's all about. The body must relieve itself, not just in the bathroom, also emotionally. It must relieve itself spiritually. You must relieve yourself of anything that is holding you in, restricting you. And comedy is one of probably the best. As I mentioned, Patricia Fripp, she's a speaker out in California. She happens to hail from England as I do, and she is a master at it. She is an actor, right? She is acting. She's not just performing because of her position. She plays the role. In fact, I've always said if I had the chance to introduce her, I would associate her with people such as Liza Minnelli, Cher, Rod Stewart, David Bowie. Why? Because they all came out of the theater. People today, actors today, may not be as steeped in the disciplines and the art form of what comedy and acting is about. I think we're missing that. We just get caught up with all the high tech and the drama and the visual. Behind that, there's a discipline. If you look at Lawrence Fishburne in Othello, yet he did The Matrix, right? These are examples. So now that brings me right back to my dear friend, who I have never met her, but since I see her all the time, Ellen DeGeneres. Has anyone come up with why she is so unique as a comedian? And the answer, ta-da, drum roll please, is she does not put down anybody, yet she's good at making comedy of herself. And that is an incredible art form. So when we think about the challenges in life, when we are faced with the hurdles, as they say, when life is trying to beat you down, think of Ellen DeGeneres. And look at some of the people who are in the comedy world that expose their very souls to us in a very comical way, yet, as this phrase is, it's just a game, then you haven't played the game. Okay? Super Bowl is one thing, but when your life, your living, your standard of living is through the very edifice, your face, your being, your presence, then you are really on point all the time. And as we go through our day, when we go through our work and we take our assessments and we look at, are we responsive? Are we competitive? Are we mild? Are we meek? I'll show you meek. Have a little laughter. Have a laughter on your shoulder. And just as my chutskis up here, I look at them from time to time and I just have some fun with them. I think it's absolutely crucial. I think it's a mature way of going through life. I think it's a very stabilizing form of making sure that we don't go off the deep end too many times. Because if we are, then we're imbalanced, right? We're imbalanced. Life is really not that fun to be in. And I think it was Mick Jagger that said, if it's no longer fun, then I won't do it. And that's the decision we have to make. No, it's not about the money, because we've heard many people, please don't throw that crap at me about, well, they have money. It's managing your state. We've had many people who have had lots of money and they commit suicide because of an imbalance, perceived imbalance in their lives. These comedians, whether it's Charlie Chaplin, Joan Rivers, Lucille Ball, Abbott and Costello, Lenny Bruce, Chris Rock, George Carlin, again, Richard Pryor, Don Rickles, Lewis Black. Oh, political satire. He is Voltaire incarnate, right? Red Fox, they talk about their times, they talk about their challenges, they express themselves. So you need to express yourself. Express yourself responsibly, express yourself being whimsically, and most importantly, effectively. Chart, thank you very much for checking in. George, I appreciate. Tracy, thank you guys coming on the tail end. I want to keep this to kind of 30 minutes because I'm coming out with a series of Managing Change in 60 Seconds. It's 170 words, thereabouts. The website is up and running. My God, guys, I've had so many challenges. You know, some of you may know my site actually went down in November. I was wiped out. And I'm still smiling. You know what I'm saying? I'm standing there, gummit. I'm still standing. So please check me out if you find this useful. A couple of notes, texts. You know, we've got 1,000,001 ways to reach each other today. I think we spend too much time on these different medium platforms than actually getting stuff done. But this I do Monday through Friday now. So I've given myself Monday through Friday now. Let's get the enunciation right. I'm giving myself the weekends off because some other business is starting to happen and I need to put my energies there. But I enjoy this. I enjoy the feedback. I hope I am imparting some enjoyable information. As I say, I'm 60 going on 6. And I want to have some fun. I want to have some fun for the next 20 or 30 years. We got an interesting discussion coming up, by the way, if I can just throw this out, with technology, not just artificial intelligence, not just the seemingly obvious where robots are going to be doing more mundane work. It is the programming so that these machines will learn how to do it. It's an interesting perspective which has been happening literally for 20 years or so. And in Europe, they talk about it a lot. I listen to a lot of international TV, which may I offer that you start to listen to yourselves, because you will get a very different focus on what's going on. And once again, it's a way of pulling in information that you don't get in traditional American broadcasting stations. So when you go out into the world and you see these changes coming about where they have robots that can literally walk like a human being, and they have been out for 20, 30 years. Remember Honda back in the day? When you have technology, I mentioned the other night about this image that can literally come out of your television. It's an Indian gentleman, and he did it with Star Wars. He did it with a couple of other movies. Now that doll in the corner, Chunky Cheese, or whatever they call Chucky, right? Comes out of your TV. So definitely check in from time to time. Of course, my website, ronaldmallen.com, and we'll get some other assets back up and running because, again, we were wiped out. Pretty much everything was gone. I have to go back in and dig around. But today's discussion was all about our behavior and the assessment tools that we use, whether it's Myers-Briggs, whether it's DISC, whether it's, what's the other one? DISC, Caliper. Look at those assessments. What can you do with the identified characteristics that the assessments bring to the surface? And then say, what do you want to do with that? Don't be content with, well, this is who I am. Go the next step. What do I want to do with it? Where can I take this? How can this help me develop? What other resources are out there that I need to perhaps mitigate that behavior or improve that behavior? And then a good dose of comedy. Fantastic stuff, because these people put their heart on their sleeve every time they're in a public audience. And I was very fortunate about, 8, 9 years ago now, stumbled on a gentleman who was in security at JP Morgan, and he had a list of all the comedy shows from Maine to Florida, and we must have hit maybe 100 different clubs, and they're all different, and you see different kinds of audiences, different kind of comedy, and it all comes back to the humanity that we all crave. So I'll finish up with that. Check out our site, and as I always say, managing change through effective communications, you know where to find me. Have a good night.